Welcome, football fans, to Bite Size Sports. I'm your host, John, joined by my good buddy Josh today to talk a little bit of Vikings football. We're kickstarting a new series here on the channel called Team Outlook or NFL Team Outlook. We're starting with the Vikes first, and this is just essentially a wide lens look at what this team might look like going forward, how much flexibility they have, the issues they're presented with this offseason and how they might navigate those. And really just, kind of a zoomed out picture of, what the next few seasons might look like for a given team. We're going to get to as many as we can. I've got 9 or 10 locked in with another a fan of that team, a local guy, which should help. But for this one, it's just the Bite Size Vikes gang. So super excited to get this off the ground. I think it'll be pretty fun to go through, and it's interesting to kind of look to zoom out and look at these teams when you're so in just in the regular season. We just got done with playoffs, and everyone's hyper analyzing the 2023 teams for so long, and now we kind of get a chance to say, well, where do these teams go from here? So it should be a fun one. It's the hometown team for both of us, so might go a little bit longer than the other episodes, but we'll try to keep it tight if we can. But before we get into it, Josh, how you been? How do you feel about the Vikings overall? Where can the people find what you do outside of this video?
Yeah, for sure. I'm feeling good. It's good to get back doing some bite-sized Vikes stuff already, because the off season's very young, but it's also, it's already time to look for the next season, which is what you do as the eternal optimist, which is what I am. And so we're already looking forward to Skull to the Bowl in 2024, 2025. No, I've been doing a little writing over at bitesizesports.com. You guys should go check out. I did a mock draft for the first round for all 32 NFL teams, kind of if I were in their position based on where the prospects are ranked right now, what I would do. Like, I think the Giants get a receiver for sure, and I think the Titans should take a tackle, but nothing super exciting. But just if you are like me and you like seeing all the incessant mock drafting, because it puts prospect names in your ears and gives you someone to look forward to when you watch the combine, which is coming up. That's something to check out. And my own blog over at mikeonthevikes.com is kind of in a hiatus right now for off season. I'm doing more with Bite Size, but just any opportunity to talk Vikings, and I'm all sorts of pumped up for it. So I'm here to put 2023 behind us and move into the optimism of the future.
Yes, sir. Welcome, other nerds and Vikings fans, football fans, who knows? But hey, let's jump right into it. This is essentially how we're going to lay all of these out. First thing we'll do is look back at 2023, and just from a thematic standpoint, what ailed this team, what the strong points were, and just kind of what went into the result they ended up with this season. So for our Vikings, I think first and foremost, for a lot of us fans, and this is not quite as much of a recency issue, but it was so prominent, particularly in like the first half of the season, that I don't think any of us forgot about it, and that's the fumbleitis. It was insane for just the way the ball bounced for them this year, even once it hit the ground on offense or defense. They just, when it was fumbled, they didn't tend to recover it, whether they forced it or coughed it up. I know, Josh, you've got some numbers pertinent to this situation, but just give us those turnover numbers that the full season ones.
Yeah, it's bad, and then it gets worse. We were second to last in total turnovers. We were tied for second to last with turnover margin, I believe, with -12. Yes. We led the league in percentage of offensive drives that ended in a turnover. And to get back to your point about early in the, or at least especially the first half of the season, I'm looking back at our turnover numbers. We went first 4 games in order. We had three turnovers, 4, 2, and 2. And then we only went 1 game the whole season without a single turnover. So we definitely had we just put ourselves in. We created an uphill battle for ourselves in almost every game.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a bad feeling about the Bucks game starting the year that way, but that team should have never beaten us, and that team somehow got to the playoffs, right? Like we were a much better team in my opinion, top to bottom, and that's just shows you that in this league you have to protect the ball against everybody. It's not just you can't get away with it even against some of the teams that aren't supposed to be good, so to speak. And so, turnover margin per game, we were at almost a full turnover per game on average, and it was just there's no good numbers to look at that. So
No,
unfortunately,
I think it was 7 fumbles lost through the first 3 games.
yeah.
So it was one of those things where it was both sides of there's no way this keeps happening at this rate, but it also felt inevitable once you got through a couple weeks. You're like, well, a fumble probably is coming. But that was huge, and it wasn't one player. It wasn't an Antonio Gibson year. It wasn't a bad AP year. It was everybody dropped it. It got contagious. Hawkinson
and
Madison.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I was
Kirk.
going to say the same thing.
No,
Like
good.
it's guys that like Madison, like he's always been a steady Eddie, and he had the fumbleitis early on in the season.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm forgetting which game it is off the top of my head, but that one game where our opening drive, we're about to score a touchdown, and Hawk fumbles it, and so out of character. Like these are just
JJ
mental
with the one into the end zone.
Yep.
Jeff, it was your best. Everyone from your best player to a backup. It was just it was unbelievable. But that was one big thing, and that's a little bit tied to the next one I want to jump into, which was really a lack of a consistent run game. Our starting running back didn't score a touchdown this season. I think they was it 28th in total rushing yards by the end of the season, and they
28th in rush attempts per game. Like we didn't even get.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how many yards per game we are, but it's probably close to 28th for sure.
Yeah, and the efficiency was rough. My sort of thought on this is, and I haven't gone back and watched every snap, and I haven't charted these things, so don't take it as gospel, but my read on the whole situation, I felt like the run game from a schematic standpoint was a little predictable. It felt like, it was inside zone or wide zone in predictable spots, as well as with, predictable run game. I think when you look at a team like Miami who ran all over teams, they had such a diverse run game. They ran some pin pull. Sure, they ran wide zone. It's Mike McDaniel over there, but they ran gap scheme stuff. They ran counter, power, jet sweeps. They were getting the backs out in space consistently. And sort of tied to this too, something that can supplement the run game at a lot of times is the screen game. And in 2022, that was a pretty big part of the offense. They'd throw 3rd and long tunnel screens to Jefferson, which had disappeared this season. Of course, Dalvin Cook is more of a threat in the screen game than the backs we had in the backfield this season. But
right.
I think they could have used Ty Chandler a lot that way. You could have allowed Madison to maybe get a little bit of a groove going, get out in space, get downhill. But they didn't really. I think there are a lot more creative ways to approach the run game going forward, and I'm hoping that's a priority for them. Frankly, I don't know. I'm not of the camp that it was on Alexander Madison that he was missing reads or he was not fighting for extra yards, whatever, however you want to call it. Um, I think he was more often than not making the correct read, going where he's coached to go. I think that a lot of those run plays were just sniffed out
Yeah.
pretty easily by the defenders. And um, moving on from Ezra Cleveland, getting a little bit meatier in the middle with Dalton Reisner. Granted, he's not the wide zone blocker that Cleveland is. But I think personnel-wise, they're starting to try to get to like drafting of Ed Ingram, bringing on Reisner. Maybe they go with a more powerful bowling ball type of guard and go with some more gap scheme. It seems like they're starting to lean that way, moving off of Cleveland and switching it up in the middle. Bradbury is still hanging on. I feel like he's probably the 2024 center.
Yeah.
Just because it's tough to find a cheaper or,
Right.
a guy that good who's also cheaper. He's pretty middle of the pack, but he's not making a ton.
Right.
But I expect to see some adjustments there just from the running game schematically, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And I think that's a good point when you mentioned the lack of creativity. It's almost like we just didn't care enough to commit enough to it. That might speak to the lack of attempts. But, I was mentioning to you before show that if you look at the teams that made it all the way deep into the playoffs, they had really consistently good running games. And you need to have that to balance out your passing attack in this league. Obviously, you have to have a quarterback and all that stuff too. But if you can't stay on the field, if you can't sustain drives, you're going to run into issues. I can shoulder some of the blame for Vikings fans if they need me to. I had a bold prediction in one of my preseason blogs that said Alexander Madison was going to average over 100 yards a game. So, that he averaged 40. Yeah, I did. He averaged 43 if you were counting per game. But again, like you said, I don't put it all on him. And you and I've talked. I think the last time we recorded something, I mentioned that Ty Chandler really showed me something when he got more touches later on in the season. That he wasn't just a explosive player. If he had a wide open hole, he could have some patience. He could have some vision. And so, with Cam Akers as a restricted free agent, we might talk a little bit more about him later. But somebody like him coming back, we still have a pretty young core of young running back committee that I think we could roll into the next season without drafting anybody and feel pretty good if we decide we're gonna lean on it a little bit more, or at least we're gonna commit to it, even if it doesn't work as well as we want it to. We weren't terrible in our yards per attempt. We weren't great. But we definitely were better than where we were at with our attempts per game. And so I think that we have to improve that in some way. I like the creativity angle. And we have a really good offensive play caller, head coach supposedly. So let's work that in next season. Let's get that going, because that's only going to pay dividends in the passing game as well. So
yeah, well, and in his pass game designs, KOC was murdering people on the whiteboard.
Yeah,
he was so good as a pass game play caller. He went into the off season and he added, or maybe he just started using them more, but all these cover two beaters, these two deep safety beaters. You saw Addison score on a couple of big deep posts that are two beaters. And he really attacked that issue of what do we do when Justin Jefferson gets bracket doubled and pressed?
Right.
How do we win with the rest of the field? And I think he, really attacked and dominated that issue and turned it into a strength, to where, hey, please go ahead and sell out to take JJ, because now we drafted a kid who I know can stretch the field deep, and I know what to expect and how to exploit it. So I hope he takes that same approach and puts it towards the run game to, on the whiteboard, give us some more options in that area, just like he did with the passing game this past offseason. And I trust him to do that.
Yeah.
But I do want to see it. And what we didn't see was more leaning on that run game once we got some key injuries, which is another big theme of 2023. You lose your quarterback, your number one wide receiver. Both tackles missed a little bit of time, one of the better tackle duos in the league. You lose TJ Hawkinson eventually, even though it didn't affect the season as a whole a ton.
Mhm.
But those were big swings, and I think they hung in. They got to 7-6. They hung in there for a little while,
Yep.
and were able to kind of roll with the punches there, but it just wasn't sustainable,
Right.
So I think it can give you some rose-colored glasses on the season,
Right.
if because it was a team that looked really sharp at times when they were fully healthy, and even when it was just Kirk without JJ, and it was Addison and Hawkinson and the mostly absent run game, the offense still hummed,
Hmm.
and it was able to do enough. But and a lot of that's really self-explanatory. I don't think we need to overanalyze the injuries. Injuries happen.
Right.
Other teams have injuries. I know that. We happen to have them at very impactful positions for us.
Yep.
But what helped kind of keep the season alive, particularly up to that 7-6 point, was a much improved defense under Brian Flores with largely. Um, they wound up finishing 17th in points per game and 13th in yards allowed, if I'm not mistaken. There's a chance
Yep.
those are backwards, but both of those are huge improvements upon 2022, where they were bottom 5 in both categories.
Yep.
So I think that's something to take heart in
Hmm.
for Vikings fans for sure, especially given the fact that Flores will be back. So now we're rolling into 2024 with almost all these defenders going into year 2 in the Flores scheme, and he'll be able to extrapolate upon a lot of what he implemented in 2023. And hopefully he'll have some more flexibility personnel wise and have a little bit more input on who they
Right.
bring in. But you're also looking at an offense that's going into year 3 now under Kevin O'Connell as a play caller, and we haven't seen that type of continuity on the offensive side since Childress,
Right. Right.
if I'm not mistaken.
I
I mean,
think that sounds right.
we you went Turner, Kubiak, Stefanski, Filippo's in there somewhere,
Yeah.
and that was up until Kirk got here, and it was musical chairs there because for a lot of the time we had the head coach calling defensive plays and not giving a shit about what happens on the other side of the ball. And then, just that consistency, I think, is going to be really underrated
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
as people look into this season. So that's something I'm really excited about. But
Yeah.
any other just kind of overarching takes on the defense here?
Yeah, I was going to kind of tie in the real quick the defense of the injuries one last time, just like how unfortunate it was, just to commiserate with fellow Vikings fans that in the season that we have basically a top 10 defense, that's the season that Kirk goes down. Like imagine that defense even last year on the playoff team where we couldn't stop anybody, but man, we could score the ball when we wanted to. We could score touchdowns whenever we wanted to. And it's just one of those. It just feels like a Minnesota
No
thing.
one will
It never
ever.
lines up.
Yeah, no one will ever have. It doesn't seem like anyone will ever have the data to make a cogent Kirk argument. It's always going to be, well, he had these shitty defenses, and it's like, what about this year? Oh, well,
Yeah,
he got hurt that year. What
yeah,
about this year?
exactly.
So that doesn't,
Yeah,
it seems like that's going to perpetuate. But maybe
yeah,
we'll get that
yeah,
in 2024 if he
yeah,
comes back. But
and then I think I was
speaking
gonna.
of, let's go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was sorry. I have the so we were 13th in scoring defense. So I think I don't know if I can't remember if you said it was 13th or
I was
17th for.
backwards.
Okay, yeah.
I
So
was
we're
backwards for sure. But yeah,
13th that, and we tapered off a little bit, but yeah, like your point was the same. Like this defense was. We were a real defense. It was really fun to watch and know that we could make plays and know that we could get stops. And with the continuity aspect, I think we're lucky in this day and age to keep Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator, because I think that
yep.
to me he would be a strong candidate to be interviewed for other coaching jobs. And I know there's a whole saga between him and Miami that's still getting worked out. But I mean, we're pretty lucky to have a top level defensive coordinator that stays with us and doesn't go take that head coaching opportunity. And then, third year for Kirk with O'Connell is huge, because Kirk's always had a lot of coaching changes dating back to his Washington days. Like he's always kind of had to learn a lot of new things, and that we saw last year before the injury. He was really clicking. He was throwing at an MVP clip, really, because it was a second year in O'Connell's system. And so I feel like if he's fully back and he doesn't suffer any sort of other injury, it's hard not to be optimistic about where we are on both sides of the ball going into next season. It feels like it's just about putting the right other guys around and doing the right things in the off season so we don't lose who we need. But also obviously moves have to happen financially, so it's not going to be perfect, but yeah, the continuity in the coaching staff is a huge plus going into next year for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And, again, we talked about this with the offensive line coming into this season, how big continuity can be. With the coaching staff and schematically, I think that's, even more so the case. Especially, too, if Flores is able to wrangle some of these 2020 Dolphins defenders that keep getting released, or other guys.
Xavier
like,
Howard.
Xavier Howard, Manuel Agba. Wilkins is going to be a free agent. Doesn't look like they're going to tag him. There's a lot of guys out there, and you also even like Josh Uche, who has familiarity with a similar scheme in New England. They didn't overlap, but there's some other guys like that who might be like a pretty simple transition into this Flores scheme that it's kind of evolved into. They might just kind of have the basic principles down already and make a pretty smooth transition. So I expect him to target some guys with whom he has some familiarity and keep this thing rolling. But the thing that is going to keep rolling is this young core. So that's the first thing I'll pull up here. And this is going to hide our faces, I think. But
it's unfortunate for the viewers that our faces will be hidden, but I think they'll survive.
Yeah. Yep, and this is what I'll probably end up cutting. Here we go. So
look at all those Pro Bowlers. Let's go.
Tons of Pro Bowlers here. So this is what we'll do for every team as well. We'll just highlight that players 27 and under is sort of what I consider young, where you've got a couple more years you can project of their prime. And guys you're really looking to build around and aren't really stopgap starters. So obviously Jefferson, Hawkinson, Darisaw, and Edison. And just that top four, can you think of a better situation for a quarterback than that group of pass catchers and a young top 5 tackle in the league like Christian Darisaw? This doesn't even mention Brian O'Neill's in a different category. Right. But just the tackle duo and the pass catchers, I can't think of a better incubation chamber for a rookie.
Right. Right.
It's the best situation of any team that's really vying for any of these rookie quarterbacks, in my opinion. But it's also something that, maybe bringing Kirk back makes more sense even than it has in the past, just based on how badly you might want to maximize this group of pass catchers.
Yeah.
And then some of these younger defenders who really burst onto the scene this season. A lot of the other mainstays are a little bit older, but Byron Murphy, who was fine. But then this safety duo of Metellus and Bynum, they're on here as good right now. I mean, don't light me up for the talent eval. Yeah, these guys could get better. They could table off as a little bit more of an average starter, but Metellus was phenomenal this year, playing all kinds of different roles for Brian Flores. And Cam Bynum, what a turnaround for him from Donatello Flores.
Yeah, for sure. Unbelievable season from Cam Bynum. He he wasn't as elite kind of near the end, but then again, the whole team wasn't really near anywhere elite near the end. So
Right.
we kind of sputtered to the end of the season. So with if we leave that out of it, Cam Bynum had an awesome year. We were both on the Cam Bynum train all year. Metellus turned into be a signing that, there were people that kind of questioned committing to him. Even we didn't
Mm-hmm.
commit to him for a ton, but some people were still questioning, like, why are we giving money to a backup safety? But some of the plays he made were just right on cue, right exactly when they needed it. Just showed that he's always in the right spot. And I think, like, Byron Murphy, you said fine. I thought he was fine too. I think he was kind of a splashy free agent deal, and I think we all kind of thought that maybe there'd be a little bit more flash to his game, but he wasn't ever bad, and that's important. Like, he was,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes with the cornerback, if you don't hear their name a lot, maybe that just means they're doing a really solid job. And that's kind of how I when I think back on the Byron Murphy season, I don't remember a ton of splash plays, but I also don't ever remember being like, oh, how are we going to handle this with Murphy out there? Like, right? Like, he wasn't
Yep.
really
Yep.
a liability, which is huge. And then, yeah, obviously, shout out to Ivan Pace. I love that undrafted free agent. If he bulks up even a little tiny bit, the rest of his game seems super polished for an
Yep.
undrafted rookie. Like, he just needs to be a smidge bigger, and life is good. So, yeah, there's a ton of optimism for that for the young core on defense as well.
Yeah, I agree. And Murphy is too like a sneaky player through whom we could clear a little cap space with an extension as well, depending on how they feel about him. Um, and I think he was good. I think stuff like PFF grades and tracking data isn't really going to do what he did justice,
Right.
um, because of all of the off zone coverage behind these blitz tracking data. They're probably going to track him as being the closest defender to a lot of open receivers. But that'll probably be the case for a lot of our DBs because, again, you're sending 5, 6, 7 all the time
Right.
and playing like basketball zones behind it.
Yep.
So you're giving them the flat all day.
Yep.
We wanted to funnel everything to the flats and trigger down and tackle. And for a lot of the season, the DBs did a great job of that. So we might see a little bit more of his skill set on display this season if we get some personnel in which Flores is a little bit more confident to play some press man. Not that Murphy's a dominant press and counter winner, but he's got pretty good speed and fluid hips to stick in man coverage.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about when he joined the team how often he would shadow guys like Cooper Kupp and DK Metcalf in that division in the NFC West before he came over. So might see a little bit more of his skill set on display coming into this season as well.
For sure.
And the main vets returning are really Harrison Phillips, Brian O'Neill, and Garrett Bradbury. Outside of those guys, we don't know who's going to be back. Everyone else is either a pending free agent or not good enough for me to consider for this list. But I think Harrison Phillips, all three of these guys are probably underrated in the NFL zeitgeist. Harrison Phillips, and it's, again, ESPN, the tracking chip data, run block win rate, double team rate, all that. It's a little bit finicky. It's not always going to be spot on, but for what it's worth, it's probably kind of close. Harrison Phillips was tracked at being double teamed 52% of the time. And he still was fourth in run block win rate. So just one of the best run stoppers in the game. And if he gets a little bit more help up front, maybe won't be seeing as many double teams. Maybe you'll see some of those highlight swim moves into the backfield to stuff a run. That he's done so much for us in purple.
Harrison Phillips.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying Harrison Phillips. I don't think I can't remember a time where he wasn't double teamed when I watched him, because he's got, like, this isn't tactic related to tactics at all, but I would always see his helmet, like, doing the face mask rising up his face a little bit after every time, because he's usually getting, like, arm barred by a couple different offensive linemen, and his helmet's getting yanked off. So every time I saw him, I was like, yeah, he's doing work in there. Like, I know it doesn't. He's not always blowing up the play, but he's eaten up a ton of blocking in there for us. So
Exactly. Like, a lot of us wanted, I sort of do too, like a true nose tackle would be nice, and you could put Harry at 3 tech, whatever. But he can two gap his ass off if you want to put him at shade nose and you get better penetrators on the interior.
yeah,
He can eat up blocks for us too. Brian O'Neill's been really, really solid. Still comfortably a top 10 right tackle. Bounced back really well from that Achilles. Achilles? Yes. And now I think, and we'll get into this shortly, but they held off on restructuring him last offseason. I think they wanted to see how he looked. And now I think they'll be comfortable getting this cap number down, pushing some money into future years, because you're going to have a really solid starting right tackle. Garrett Bradbury might be his last year in purple, but solid signal caller at center. He's not too bad.
Right.
So next, what I think makes the most sense is jumping to, how much money can they clear up before they get into, they really get into free agency. So this is the cap as it stands, just under 36 mil. And this is, once we got the final cap number for 2024, this is per over the cap, almost 36 million cap space right as it stands right now. 2025 is wide open as well. So I expect Brzezinski and the gang to push a ton of money into 25 and 26 when they attack the free agent market. But these are the big buttons they could push, really.
I like
to
that.
free up some more money.
Yeah, I like that you have Brian O'Neill right at the top there, right after we finish talking about him, because he was one of the guys I was writing on as one of the. To me, he's a priority to restructure. Yes, he's almost 30, but I was looking at some of the numbers. He played almost 80% of the offensive snaps. He played in 14 of the 17 games. Like I feel like he's had an injury or two the past couple of years. He'll miss a game or two. And obviously last year he missed 3, but it's not like they're not like terrible injuries where he's out forever. And it's not like when he comes back, he's a less player. Every time he's come back, he's been that top 10, top 15 tackle. So I think you for sure restructure him, push money out for the next 2-3 years, maybe. I don't know. Even if that means next year's really good, the year after that's pretty good, and then maybe the third year it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but I think it's still worth it in the now, especially with some of the questions we have this offseason financially that we'll get into later. Like we need to save money where we can, and I have no problem giving him some guaranteed money down the road. But
yeah, and I'm right there with you. And it's another thing too, like you're also projecting into the future where I'm sure the cap's going to keep rising and inflating. The NFL, pretty good business model if we don't run into another COVID year.
Right.
So you're pushing money into a year where it's going to be a smaller percentage of that year's cap at this point, which makes a ton of sense for the good teams to do. A team like the Vikings that, could catapult themselves into legitimate contention with a good offseason here. And the kick the can doom and gloomers are going to say, oh, well, you'll have to pay the piper sometime. And it's like, yeah, but also we get one decent draft class in the mix.
Yeah.
And 4 years of those guys, all of a sudden it's a whole different story.
Right.
All we need. It's all we need.
Yeah.
To really buoy the depth.
And anyone who's been a Twins fan for my entire lifetime, all we've asked for is for people to spend money. So I don't care if we spend money 10 years into the future. Like if we think we can build a winning roster now, even if let's say the Rams won a Super Bowl, they had to pay for that Super Bowl, and they looked like they were going to have to rebuild for a while. They were better than expected this year, but definitely 2 years ago they were non-existent. But that's the whole point, is to try to win a Super Bowl. So if you can find a way, don't whine about the money. Just get it done.
Yep. And exactly. And with Harrison Smith, 19 and change, $19.2 million cap hit. As it stands right now, I'm hoping this is a retirement. Just that's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
If it's a cut, maybe he takes a pay cut and comes back. And these numbers are a little bit different, but hopefully he just retires a Viking, whether that's coming back or retiring now. That's at least how I feel about it. You're not going to find anybody more handsome, but you might be able to get some more speed out there, and
Maybe.
and some youth, maybe, right? But that one's pretty straightforward for me. It's a glaring cap number.
Yeah,
When you
it's
look at the
huge.
table.
It's
Yeah.
huge. It's just like, even Thielen last year, we knew very early in the offseason, like Thielen wasn't going to be back next
Yeah.
year. And it was a huge bummer, and nobody wanted that. So we were happy he had a good season in Carolina, but he'll always be a Viking. But we just
Yep.
couldn't bring him back at that number. And Harry's the same way this year. It's going to be tough to get him back. If
Yeah,
he's
maybe
playing
he
still.
goes and has an Eric Weddle year on a
Yeah.
contender or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
I wouldn't hate him for it.
Nope.
Hawkinson for me, this is a button I'd be willing to press as well. And it's a slightly different reasoning, and I spoke on this in my article. Like I think when you look at Hawkinson, yes, he's coming off the Kirby Joseph special, and he might not be fully back until maybe halfway into the season next season, depending on how he approaches that recovery. Successful surgery, but it depends on how quickly he gets back to full motion exercises and how hard he pushes that recovery. But my thought on this is, you can do a full Hawkinson restructure. You can push $7.4 million out into future years and lower his cap that much for 2024. And I think that makes sense for different reasons than restructures usually do. I'm confident he'll come back effective.
Yeah.
He's 27.
Right.
But for this 2024 season, if you want to be raring to go when he gets back on the field, I think it makes sense to lighten his cap hit, since you won't have him on the field for maybe half the season, at least a few weeks, probably, and try to fill out the team a little bit better around him. Maybe instead of bringing back Johnny Munt, you go get maybe a lower level pass catching tight end who you're comfortable with, or maybe you draft a guy, maybe use that money to, improve the defense this particular season. I think that makes a lot of sense because, I'm not too scared of the injury affecting him long term. Right. Just the way these guys, I mean, the medical hands he's in are top of the world, and the praises have been sung of this team's training staff and everything like that. So I feel good about that one. I don't think we need to talk too much about Dean Lowry. He was abhorrent and invisible.
He only played in 9 games or something. So
exactly, they just
14 tackles. Yay!
Yeah, he lost all his snaps to Jonathan Bullard, and anybody. He was bottom of the depth chart really by the end of the season. So I think that's a no hesitation cut for me. Nope. Save a couple million. And you'll need a little bit of dead money there. And speaking of dead money,
here it comes.
These, I think, are the free agents for whom it makes more sense to talk about right away. Yeah. And so let's say we do all those moves on the last screen. You're looking at almost $70 million, including these dead cap hits. Now, what I have here is extension savings. And that's just that amount of the void money that upon extension is off of 2024 salary cap table. So with Kirk, his dead cap hit would go down to, or void money hit essentially would go down to 10.25. And the rest of the money would prorate out into the following 3 seasons, actually, the way his void years were set up initially. And with Danielle Hunter, his split's right in half. You take right in half of that void money in 2024. The other half goes into 2025. Everything else is from there. So you can lower Danielle's cap hit for 2024 pretty feasibly if you do a 3-4 year extension, which I think might make some sense. I'm of the camp, you bring Danielle back and see what else happens. You pay him what he's worth and see what else happens. He's that good. Yep. But the most interesting one of these, I think, I don't want to belabor the Kirk conversation on this particular video. You'll hear a bunch of it. And frankly, at this point, I just want to know if he's back or not, so we can stop
Yes.
doing the whole thing. But Marcus Davenport, a lot of people like just have this visceral hate for Marcus Davenport,
Yep.
and like whatever it is, like people will say, "Oh, he quit on the team.
Yeah.
He was healthy and he could have come back, but he didn't." All right, sure, but let's remove emotion from the situation
Right.
and take a look at allocation of resources. Would you prefer, this is a rhetorical to the camp that really just hates him and wants him off the team at all costs? Would you prefer the 6.8 million? Would you prefer to pay him $6.8 million to not be on the team, or probably the same exact amount of money to be on the team? Because if you extend him, he had 4 void years on his contract. So if you extend him, 1.7 goes into the next 3 years.
Yep.
Instead of that full 6.8. So
Yep.
It's a $1.7 million hit for 24 from 6 and 7. And he's probably getting a 1 year, $5-6 million deal.
Yep.
It's not fudging these numbers much at all. And it's another year. 1 year, $13 million prove it year. Not as ideal as a 1 year, $6 million prove it year that also saves you money. You get a player instead of not a player for that money.
Yeah.
Just logistically, that's something you do.
Yeah. I'm kind of on both sides of that, because I was kind of a sucker for that little interview he gave outside of his locker where, he didn't seem all that interested. I didn't hate the guy for it, but I was like, okay, yeah, maybe it doesn't seem like he's vibing. Maybe he's not. But yeah, when you look at the numbers, bring him back. Who knows? He's been a good player. There's a reason we brought him in, and why not give it a shot with the second year in the building? I'm definitely in that camp. I'm also in the Daniil.
Opportunity cost of not bringing him back could be pretty drastic, frankly, especially with this really weak edge room we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, and because we have Wanham as a free agent as well, so we need, we're going to need bodies in there as well. And so yeah, I have no problem bringing him back or extending him, because we are going to save money.
Yep.
And I fully expect us to bring Daniil Hunter back. I don't know why you wouldn't. I was looking at Daniil Hunter's games played over the past few seasons, and the season that he got hurt, he played only 7. He didn't play at all in 2020. The season after that, he played in 7 games, but the 3 seasons before that, and then the past 2 seasons, he's been in every game. He's played in every game of the, his durability's been there, and he had 16.5 sacks last year. You need that. It's another thing that all good teams have. I already mentioned running game, obviously quarterback, but edge rushing is something that every good team needs. And I think Daniil proved that he's up there. And so you already have him on the team. He's got to be easier to get than trying to pay somebody else. And he's also got to be easier to get to, or you can count on him more than you can if you take the top edge rusher at 11. We might be, at 11, we might be able to pick one of the best edge rushers in this draft, but are you going to trust a rookie, or are you going to trust a guy coming off 16.5 sacks who's in his prime? So I think for a team that wants to win, yes, you got to go get Daniil. And then I've been panicked about this Kirk Cousins dead cap money, but the way you laid it out, I don't think I need to be too worried. I'm very worried he's gonna go somewhere else. We're gonna have to pay $30 million, and we won't be able to do anything else with our money. But the numbers look now that we'll still be able to do things in the offseason. When I first saw that dead cap hit, I was like, if he doesn't play for us, we are gonna be severely handcuffed. And I was getting really nervous because I want Kirk back personally, but I also want to draft a quarterback, and I don't want to lock Kirk in for another 4 to 5 years. And I've heard he's asking for 3. I wouldn't mind 3, but a high guaranteed amount for 2 years would be my ideal situation, and then have a rookie work under him for a while. But I don't know if that's likely at all. So
yeah, I mean the final numbers on this cap increase both make it easier to eat that dead cap hit and easier to extend him, frankly. So I think, I don't know, both options seem more viable than they did before that. So I'm right there with you. And yeah, if you get a rookie quarterback in the building, even if you've got 2 more years of a high Kirk cap hit, maybe an easy out on the third,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably right when you're starting to see the big Jefferson cap hits, the big Darisaw cap hits.
Right.
Is going to be when you transition to a rookie contract quarterback,
Yep.
which could be perfect, frankly.
Yes.
Really quick, I think you let all these guys walk. Probably. I mean, these are the really big ticket free agents outside of these guys that we've got void money on. These guys are just true unrestricted free agents.
Yep.
And that's, I mean, I think you let them walk. You got to find a Jordan Hicks type.
Yep.
But I think you can get an upgrade out there. Same
The
with KJ,
yeah, the fan in me would be very sad to not have KJ and DJ on the team. The fan in me is very attached to them, but KJ Osborne did not look the same last year. I don't think you can justify too much money for him. Wanham would be nice, but again, I don't know what he'll command. And then Reisner would be nice too, just because offensive line depth is so vital. And I thought he did a nice job when he came in. But again, I'm with you on the fact, like, these aren't the top priorities. Like, if we lose these guys, it's definitely not, okay, season's over, right? This is just probably the smart play.
Yeah, just find another mid-level starter if it's not these guys. And it could be these guys, sure. But I could see us priced out of DJ Wanham.
Yeah.
I could see a team giving him like an Arden Key or a Samson Abukum deal from last year. So I don't know. I'm not really married to these guys, but you go and find you bring back these guys, or you find a guy like these guys.
Yes.
And these are easy things to do, frankly.
Right.
Well, that's about it for all the tables. So all that in hand, if we're looking at things like flexibility, and kind of future assets, as well as like that young core we talked about. If you had to assign a letter grade, and this is the first one we've done in the series, so we won't have anything to compare it to, but if you had to assign a letter grade to the Vikings, let's say 3 to 5 year future, just with what they kind of have at hand, how would you grade them, their situation?
I feel like a B is a good spot. My gut tells me it's a B. I think we have too many uncertainties, too many issues to go to the A range. But I'm also, I'm not at DEFCON 1. I'm not panicked about this squad going into next year, and I definitely still think we're an above average team that should be competing for playoff seeding.
Yes.
So I'm going to give us a B with some, this offseason does have to go right. And that's why I like a B grade as well. Because if we make some really piss poor moves this offseason, or things don't go the way we plan it, even if we think they're good moves, then I think we can quickly move down to the C or up to the A if we do what we think. So I'm gonna give us like an 85%. That's like as B average as you can get.
Yeah, and you're a teacher, the percentage.
Exactly.
Well, I'm actually right there with you. All the opportunity is there for them to make the right decisions and get this team where it needs to go, right?
Yeah.
They're not like desperate for assets. They don't have to 2022 Ryan pulls it, or 21. And just like reset the cap and get all the vets out and start over. It's more, again, probably the best group of pass catchers in the NFL right now.
Oh yeah.
You got a 25 and a 22-year-old star receiver. You've got one of the better tackle duos in the NFL. I think why it can't even sniff an A for me is all the question marks on defense. You need to draft well on the defensive side of the ball over the next couple of years, because like we said, these big known commodity contributors on defense are aging out.
Yep.
Even that safety duo, we're in love with it. They're both 26.
Yep.
You could see them start to slow down in a few years.
Right as you mentioned that, I was just pulling up our draft history because that made me think of the exact same. Like Lewis Seen to me is always going to be what could have been Kyle Hamilton, and that's always going to bother me.
Or Jordan Davis.
Or Jordan Davis, yes. And then I look at
Tyler
last,
Linderbaum.
yeah.
Sorry, I stopped.
But then I look at last year and our first 4 or 3 picks: Jordan Addison, Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward. Like Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward, I'm still really high on. I think they both
Yes.
showed good signs last year, and so if
Mhm.
that draft class comes into their own, and another good draft class like you mentioned comes in, then yeah, I think that's what'll get us the A if some of our draft picks pan out. You have to have good draft picks. That's another way to win in this league. You have to have draft contributors.
Yes, exactly. And we need some early contributors over the next couple seasons for sure. But that will do it for the first episode of this Team Outlook series. This has been the Vikings. Thanks if you've tuned in this long. Let us know down in the comments how you would grade this team situation, how you feel they might approach this offseason. We'd love to hear from you and talk down there. But until further ado, we'll be back with another one of these, hopefully pretty quick. We've got some more teams on the docket. But as Josh and I like to say, it is skull to the bull. You can see the vision. The Vikings,
it's all coming together.
He's got the world at his fingertips. It's all coming. I mean, this is exactly, we got him exactly where we want him.
Yes,
right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys. Check out this sick outro music.